In this lesson, we're going to animate our fish using the liquify effect. Okay, so to get to that fish, we're going to need to go back into our infographic split comp. So go ahead and choose that. And I'm just rolling my mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit. And whenever this pops back up, and I'm going to pan down to the green fish, or I can always come over here to my timeline and scroll down because I know already that he's 2 from the bottom of that stacking order. So you could select it from looking in the comp, but if that's taking too long, you can just scroll all the way down. Go ahead and hit Control C to copy the fish. Then let's just go back out to our main coral infographic and we'll hit Control V to paste him. And he's going to be a little bit lower because of the size of that other piece. So we can just scale him proportionately by holding Shift while we scale. And you probably want to go ahead and continuously rasterize just so that he's nice and crisp. And I also want to flip him so he's looking the other direction. So I'm going to right click that and go to transform, flip horizontal. And I'm going to rotate him a little bit as well, just so that he's not looking down. He's kind of more forward facing like that. Okay, so to create this animation that we're going to make, I first want to put this fish into his own composition. So there's nothing else in the comp with him. So we'll go ahead and select the fish, hit Control Shift C to bring that up. And we're going to call him Green Fish Swim. And instead of leaving all my attributes, I'm going to move all attributes into the new composition because all those changes we just made, scaling, turning on the continuously rasterize, all of that, I want to live inside of the comp. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And then let's double click that composition to go inside of it. I'm just going to Alt scroll in to the fish a little bit. And the comp is way too big. What we have right now is 1280 by 720 because that's the size of the comp we had in our main comp. So to make it smaller, a really easy way to do that is to come over here and choose your region of interest. So that's going to be this option right next to your toggle transparency button. And you basically can just draw a box around whatever your region of interest is. Maybe change it a little bit if it's not quite the right size. And then you'll be able to use this as your new composition size simply by cropping using that box. So once you have the region of interest set up, simply come up here to composition and choose crop comp to region of interest. And now that's our new composition size. Now we're ready to animate our fish. So come over here to effects and presets. We're going to type in liquify. Grab that effect, just drop it onto the fish. And we're going to be using the warp tool to animate the fish mostly. So what I want to do is make it look like his tail and face are closest to us. So I'm going to start dragging his face down and just making this part of his body a little bit bigger using that liquify tool. And we can drag the tail down a little bit more, maybe kind of flare it out a bit just so that it's larger. Now, if you get carried away and something goes wrong, you feel like it's too much, you can use this option right here, which is your reconstruction tool, and just paint over an area. And that's going to take it back to where it was before there was any distortion. So I'm just going to bring that back just kind of the way it was because I actually thought that looked pretty good. And once you're happy with it, we want to go ahead and set a keyframe for that distortion mesh. So basically, if I turned on my distortion mesh, and go ahead and do that just so you can see, this area that's being distorted, we can set a keyframe to kind of lock that distortion in place, and then we can set another key and distort it in a different way. So I'm going to turn the mesh back off and just go ahead and set a keyframe right here at the very first frame of my animation, and that's going to add that key. I can hit the U key to bring that up. And now I want to take him back to normal and then kind of start to create an animation that looks basically the opposite of this. So his head and tail are going to be further away and this part of his body will be closer. So let's scrub forward a bit. And just so that we don't distort him too much by trying to get him back to normal, we can grab that reconstruction brush and just paint that over his whole body. and then it's just going to be a lot easier to use. So now let's start pulling his tail up and around in the other direction. Just kind of using that warp tool to move that into place. And basically you can see I'm just kind of changing the curve of his body. So before he was curved sort of up, and now I want him to be curved down. And if you find that you have too much distortion, again, using that reconstruction tool is a really easy way to fix that. Also, if maybe you have too much distortion added, you can always come in here to your warp tool options and change your brush size, and maybe that's going to just give you a little bit more control if it's smaller like that. Maybe change your brush pressure. If I make my pressure less, then it's just going to affect areas less, so that can be really helpful as well. But I think that this looks pretty good. So let's scrub in between our two keyframes. And you can see how now he just kind of looks like he's going back and forth. Might need to put a little bit more work into the tail, because right here his tail kind of comes up a little bit much and wasn't having that nice taper. And then over here, we're not getting much of a taper either. So I'm just going to push this back in just a bit there. That looks a little bit better. Okay, so once you're happy with the way that this looks, we're ready to create another key that's going to take us back from this keyframe to this keyframe. Now there are expressions that will do that, but they don't work with the liquify preset. So what we need to do is find the key that's going to actually look like it's one step ahead of this first key. And then we're going to just put it farther ahead of this keyframe so that it's almost back to the position that he is in at the beginning. So if I just scrub one forward, that's going to be the key that I want. But I want to make sure that my timing is right first. Right now, this is happening over about 12 frames, and I think it could probably be faster. We could probably do it in about 6. So I'm just going to count forward 6 frames using page down. And we can just pull this backwards a bit. And now you can see that that is just a little bit faster. Now let's move forward 1 frame from that first key, and we'll go ahead and set another keyframe right there. And now that we know that we have 6 frames from here to here, we know that we need to go forward 5 frames to set this key up. So if I just sit on this keyframe right here, move forward 5 frames, we can put that right there. And now, basically what's happening is once he moves from this key to this key, he's 1 frame away from repeating right here. So if we caused a loop to happen, it would jump from this key to this key and finish that animation. So you can see why it's better to do it this way than copying this keyframe and pasting it over here, because then you get just a little bit of a pause in your animation because you're actually seeing that same frame twice. So it's a better tip for just being able to create a better loop. So because of the way that we did this, you may want to go ahead and maybe add some easy ease, but it's going to be a little bit tricky. So you may only want to add it to this middle keyframe because it doesn't really know that it's going to be going back here simply because of the way that we'll be setting it up later on. So maybe just having a little bit of easy ease in that middle will help to add just a little more realism, but I wouldn't add it to the other 2 keys because it might cause a little bit of a strange pause. So in this lesson, we learned how to use the liquify to animate our fish. We also used the restoration brush to kind of clean up anything that was causing a problem. And in our next lesson, we're going to be rendering out this fish animation and re-importing it so that it can loop, and we'll be able to scrub all the way across the layer that our fish is animated on and see him continuing to move back and forth. So we'll learn about how to do that in our next lesson.